Early December had wrapped our little house in twinkling lights and the smell of cinnamon. I'd spent weeks making everything perfect, garlands draped just right, stockings hung in pairs, and a tree that could have been in a magazine. It was our first Christmas here, and I'd been counting the days, imagining the two of us curled up with Coco, watching the snow fall outside. Mark had smiled when I told him my plans, that warm smile that always made me think we were on the same page. But a week before Christmas, he said something that made the whole room feel colder. He was in the kitchen, holding his coffee mug, not quite meeting my eyes. "I can't take the day off. Urgent work event." His voice was calm, matter of fact, like this was just bad luck. My stomach sank, but I told myself not to read into it. His job had always been demanding, and I'd learned to live with last-minute changes. Still, the thought of waking up alone on Christmas morning felt like someone had quietly stolen something from me. He leaned down, kissed my forehead, and said, "I'm sorry, babe. If I could get out of it, I would." I wanted so badly to believe him. I forced a smile, told him it was fine, and decided I'd spend Christmas Day with my sister's family instead. I pictured the laughter, the kids tearing into presents, the smell of turkey roasting in her oven. It wouldn't be the Christmas I'd imagined, but we'd make up for it later. At least that's what I told myself. Over the next few days, I tried to convince myself it wasn't a big deal. I threw myself into helping my sister plan her holiday dinner, wrapping presents for my nieces and nephews, and baking more cookies than anyone really needed. But every time I passed our living room, with the tree glowing softly in the corner, I felt that little pinch of disappointment. I'd imagined us here together, sipping wine, laughing, maybe even dancing to cheesy Christmas music. Instead, I'd be waking up to an empty side of the bed. Mark didn't seem to notice my change in mood. Or maybe he did, but chose not to mention it. He was upbeat, talkative, even more affectionate than usual in the days leading up to Christmas. It was almost enough to make me forget the ache I was carrying around. Almost. Every time I looked at him, I reminded myself that this was just one holiday, just one year. Couples compromise, right? That's what makes relationships last. Still, there was a tiny voice in the back of my mind that kept whispering, "But why now? Why this year?" I tried to push it aside, tried to quiet it with logic and love, but it clung to me like a shadow. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was just being sensitive. Or maybe, though I didn't dare say it out loud, it was something I didn't want to believe. On Christmas Eve, I stayed up later than usual, half hoping Mark would say something like, "You know what? I managed to get the day off after all." But instead, he was in bed early, claiming he had a busy morning ahead. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to his steady breathing. My mind wandered between missing him the next day and wondering if I was just overthinking everything. I hated how much space that question took up in my head. The next morning, he kissed me goodbye before the sun came up, smelling faintly of aftershave. I stayed in bed for a while, listening to the quiet hum of the heater, before finally getting up and packing a few gifts to take to my sister's. As I locked the front door, I glanced back at our house, festive, warm, and completely still. It felt strange leaving it behind on Christmas Day. Like I was walking away from the holiday I'd been building in my head all month. Driving to my sister's, I told myself I was lucky to have family close by, lucky to have a husband who worked hard for us, lucky that this was just a temporary change in plans. And yet, underneath all that reasoning, there was still that uneasy flutter in my chest, like a warning I couldn't quite translate, but one I knew I'd remember. Christmas morning at my sister's was loud, messy, and exactly what you'd expect with 3 kids under 10. Wrapping paper flew through the air like confetti. Someone was always shouting about batteries, and the smell of cinnamon rolls filled the kitchen. I laughed along, grateful for the distraction, though every so often my mind drifted to what Mark might be doing at his so-called urgent work event. I pictured him in some conference room, sipping bad coffee, surrounded by stressed-out coworkers. Between gift exchanges, I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, half watching my nieces build a Lego castle. That's when my phone buzzed, a message from a friend. Just a link and a short note. "Doesn't that guy look like Mark?" I smiled at the coincidence and tapped it, expecting some meme or silly video. Instead, the the screen filled with a live stream from a charity gala happening across town. Glittering lights, champagne glasses, and music that didn't belong to any office event I'd ever heard of. At first, I didn't see him. The camera panned over a crowd of strangers, all dressed to impress, laughing and mingling. But then, there he was. Mark. In a tailored suit I hadn't seen before, holding a glass of wine and laughing in that easy, charming way that had once been my favorite thing about him. And he wasn't alone. She was standing so close to him, her hand resting lightly on his arm like it belonged there. Long dark hair, a sparkly dress that caught the light every time she moved, and a smile that was just a little too intimate. I froze, my thumb hovering over the screen as the camera lingered for a moment, long enough for me to notice the way his eyes softened when he looked at her. Then she leaned in and kissed his cheek, quick but deliberate, like she'd done it 100 times before. My stomach dropped. The noise of my sister's living room faded until all I could hear was the faint music coming from my phone. It was like watching a stranger wearing my husband's face. I blinked, hoping I'd imagined it, but the image didn't change. It wasn't just the kiss, it was the ease, the familiarity, the comfort between them. My fingers were suddenly cold as I hit the screenshot button. Once. Twice. Then I started screen recording, my hands trembling but steady enough to catch every second. I told myself to breathe, to stay calm, because I was sitting in a room full of people who had no idea that my entire Christmas had just shifted. A child laughed nearby, someone shouted about pie in the kitchen, and I sat there smiling faintly like nothing was wrong. But inside, I was already replaying what I'd just seen, knowing that no matter how much I wanted to, I'd never be able to unsee it. I lowered the volume on my phone and stared at the paused frame, Mark mid-laugh, her hand still on his arm. It felt like proof and betrayal all wrapped up in one frozen image. I wanted to smash the phone, to delete the video, to erase the moment from existence. But instead I saved it twice, uploading it to my cloud just in case. My hands were steady now, fueled by something sharper than shock. A part of me expected my face to give me away, that someone in the room would notice the way my eyes had gone flat, the way my smile no longer reached them. But my sister was busy in the kitchen. The kids were high on sugar, and the room was too full of noise to catch the quiet breaking inside me. I sat back, forcing myself to nod and laugh at all the right moments, tucking my phone into my pocket like it didn't just hold the first crack in my marriage. When Mark called later to check in, his voice was warm, casual, as if nothing about our lives had shifted. I matched his tone perfectly, telling him I hoped his event was going well. My voice didn't shake, not once, because now I knew something he didn't, that Christmas had just given me a gift I never asked for but would absolutely use. For the next week, I played my role like a seasoned actress. I laughed at his stories, kissed him goodnight, and even asked about his work event with a curiosity that sounded genuine. All the while, I was quietly building something behind the scenes. The first call I made was to a lawyer, a woman recommended by a friend who'd once whispered, "If you ever need someone who's both ruthless and discreet, she's the one." She didn't disappoint. By the end of our first conversation, I knew exactly what I'd need to gather, so I started collecting. Bank statements, credit card records, copies of the mortgage and the insurance policies. I went through our filing cabinet with the precision of a surgeon, leaving everything exactly where it had been so nothing would seem out of place. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I just prepared. Every click of the printer, every saved document felt like another brick in the wall I was building between us. Outside of my home office, life looked perfectly normal. We went out for dinner with friends, we exchanged small talk over morning coffee, and he had no idea that the ground beneath him was quietly eroding. The irony? He probably thought I was still upset about missing Christmas together. If only he knew just how much I'd moved on from that. A few days in, I started widening the circle, just a little. A quiet lunch with an old friend who happened to know a lot of people in Mark's professional world. A casual conversation with my sister over wine, dropping vague comments about needing to be more careful with trust. I wasn't spreading gossip, not yet. I was planting seeds, little truths that, once watered by curiosity, would grow on their own. The goal wasn't to humiliate him in the moment. It was to set the stage, so when the truth came out, it would land with maximum impact. One evening, while he was in the shower, I slipped his phone out of his jacket pocket. No passcode change. Rookie mistake. In under a minute, I found the email confirmation for the gala tickets, purchased months ago. The urgent work event had been nothing more than a script he'd rehearsed for me. I forwarded the receipt to myself, deleting the sent message so he'd be none the wiser. It was almost too easy, and that ease made me angrier than I expected. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. I smiled when he came out of the bathroom, kissed him on the cheek, and asked if he wanted tea. Every interaction became a test of my patience, and I was passing with flying colors. Because now, the plan was no longer just about knowing. It was about making sure everyone else would know too. By the end of that week, the pieces were falling into place like a puzzle I didn't want, but was determined to finish. My lawyer had drawn up preliminary documents, ready for me to sign. I'd organized every screenshot, every receipt, every digital breadcrumb into neatly labeled folders, both on my laptop and an external drive. If Mark ever tried to deny anything, I could bury him in proof before he finished his first sentence. I started rehearsing in my mind how it would happen. Not a screaming match in our living room. Not a teary, private conversation he could twist in his favor. No, I wanted the reveal to be as public as his betrayal. I wanted the same audience he'd unwittingly invited into our marriage to see exactly what he'd been doing. And I wanted it timed perfectly when everyone was watching. Every time I passed him in the hallway or heard him laughing on the phone, I felt a strange mix of calm and anticipation. He thought I was oblivious. He thought I was still the woman who believed everything he said. But Christmas had changed that. Now I was the woman who knew, and who was patient enough to wait for the right moment to make sure he knew I knew. New Year's Eve arrived wrapped in glitter and expectation, and I played my part to perfection. I sent out invitations weeks in advance, friends, family, a few of Mark's colleagues who thought the world of him. The theme was a fresh start, which felt poetic in ways no one else could possibly understand. Our house was alive with music, clinking glasses, and that buzz people get when they think they're about to step into something better. Mark was in his element, moving through the crowd, shaking hands, laughing too loudly. I watched him from across the room, noting how he never once suspected he was the guest of honor in a show he didn't know was playing. Every now and then, he'd glance at me with that charming smile, the same one he'd worn at the gala. I returned it every time, my own smile hiding the fact that midnight wasn't going to bring him fireworks. It was going to bring him the truth. I kept the champagne flowing, the playlist upbeat, the mood light. People danced in the living room, chatted in the kitchen, and wandered out to the patio to admire the crisp winter night. I moved between them all like a hostess in her happy place. But inside, my pulse was steady, my mind razor sharp. Because when the clock hit 12, I wouldn't just be ringing in a new year. I'd be ending something that should have ended the moment I saw that kiss. As the minutes ticked closer to midnight, I could feel the air in the house tighten, not because anyone sensed what was coming, but because anticipation always does that to a room. People were already gathering near the TV for the countdown, glasses in hand, cheeks flushed from champagne. Mark slipped his arm around my waist, pulling me close. "Ready to welcome the new year?" he asked, his voice warm, almost tender. I nodded, meeting his gaze, thinking, "Oh, you have no idea." Instead of turning on the televised countdown, I walked to the center of the room and raised my glass. Conversations quieted, the way they do when people know something's about to happen. "Before we toast to the new year," I began, smiling as if I were about to tell a heartwarming story, "I want to share my favorite memory from this Christmas." A few people chuckled, and Mark's smile widened, until I picked up the remote. The TV screen flickered to life, but instead of Times Square, the room filled with the image I knew too well. Mark at the gala, holding a glass of wine, laughing with her. I'd zoomed in just enough so no one could miss the kiss on his cheek. The video looped seamlessly, that small damning moment playing over and over as the room fell into a stunned, heavy silence. The whispers started almost immediately, soft gasps, a few muffled, "Oh my God," the sound of someone awkwardly clearing their throat. Mark froze beside me, his hand slipping from my waist like he'd just touched fire. His eyes darted from the screen to me, his mouth opening and closing without a single word making it out. I didn't give him the chance to speak. I lifted my glass higher, my voice clear and calm. To truth, I said, letting my gaze sweep the room, and to never wasting another holiday on a liar. A few people shifted uncomfortably, others looked away, but no one dared to break the silence. Mark's face had gone pale, his charm gone, replaced by the look of a man who'd just realized the floor beneath him was gone. I set my glass down, turned, and walked toward the door. No yelling, no dramatic tears. Just the sound of my heels against the hardwood and the faint hum of the video still looping behind me. The papers were already filed, my bags already packed. This wasn't a goodbye. It was a release. And as I stepped out into the cold night air, I realized the countdown had already happened. My new year had started early. By the next morning, the video had taken on a life of its own. I hadn't posted it directly. Oh no, I'd simply accidentally sent it to a friend who worked for a local gossip page. From there, it spread like wildfire. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages ranging from shock to support, and I watched from my couch as the story gained traction online. Headlines didn't mention my name, but anyone who knew us knew exactly who it was about. Mark didn't come home that night, or the night after. I imagined him scrambling to do damage control, juggling calls from his boss, his colleagues, maybe even his precious mistress, though she seemed to vanish as quickly as she'd appeared. His reputation at work took a hit almost immediately. Whispers had a way of turning into truths when they traveled fast enough. Meanwhile, I was fine. More than fine, actually. There was a strange kind of peace in knowing I'd already taken care of everything. The divorce paperwork was moving forward, my accounts were secure, and my life, my real life, was already waiting for me on the other side of this mess. And for the first time in months, I woke up without that heavy knot in my chest. Weeks passed, and the sting of Christmas faded into something almost distant. I started saying yes to things I'd been putting off for years. Trips with friends, dinners that lasted late into the night, mornings spent lingering over coffee with no rush to be anywhere. Every small choice felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't realized I'd given away. Freedom didn't come in one dramatic burst. It arrived quietly, in moments that felt light and unburdened. The following December, I didn't bother with a tree or garlands. Instead, I packed a single suitcase and boarded a plane to somewhere warm, where the only snow I'd see was on postcards in tourist shops. My friends and I booked a little seaside villa, the kind with whitewashed walls and balconies that opened to the ocean breeze. No schedules, no obligations, just sun, salt, and laughter. On Christmas Eve, I stood on that balcony, drink in hand, the air soft and warm against my skin. Somewhere in the distance, music floated from a cafe, blending with the sound of waves against the shore. I thought about last year for exactly 1 second, and then let it drift away like a boat I had no interest in calling back. Christmas night was a blur of fireworks and laughter. From the balcony, I could see bursts of color blooming over the water, their reflections dancing on the waves. My friends were inside, singing along, badly, to some old holiday song, and I felt that quiet warmth that only comes when you know you're exactly where you're supposed to be. No pretenses, no lies. Just life, raw and unfiltered. I lifted my glass toward the horizon, not for anyone else to see, but for myself. Last Christmas, he gave me a lie, I murmured into the night air. This year, I gave myself my life back. The words didn't sting. They felt like a victory lap. And in that moment, I realized I hadn't just survived him. I'd outgrown him entirely. The clock struck midnight, and another firework lit up the sky, brighter than the rest. I smiled, taking a slow sip of my drink, the salt of the ocean mixing with the sweetness on my lips. Somewhere inside me, a chapter had closed for good. And the best part? I hadn't just walked away from the past. I'd stepped straight into the kind of future I'd always deserved.